On August 7, 1942, at 6:14 a.m., the first wave of landing craft from the 1st Marine Division hit the beaches of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. Major General Alexander Vandergrift commanded 10,119 Marines in the initial assault. Their objective was a partially completed Japanese airfield on the island's northern coast. American intelligence estimated Japanese strength at approximately 2,200 men, primarily construction troops from the Imperial Japanese Navy's 11th and 13th construction units. The Marines expected fierce resistance. They encountered almost none. The landing force moved inland through coconut plantations and dense jungle. By nightfall on August 7th, Marines had secured the airfield without significant combat. Japanese construction workers and their Korean laborers had fled into the jungle, abandoning equipment, supplies, and half-eaten meals. The Marines found rice still warm in cooking pots. They also found something more valuable: detailed plans and construction schedules for what the Japanese called Airfield No. 1. The Americans renamed it Henderson Field, after Major Lofton Henderson, a Marine aviator killed at Midway 2 months earlier. The ease of the initial landing proved deceptive. What followed became the first sustained ground combat between American and Japanese forces in the Pacific War. It would last 6 months. The 1st Marine Division would face starvation, disease, and repeated assaults by Japanese forces that eventually outnumbered them significantly during specific engagements. The campaign would cost the division 1,142 Marines killed and 2,655 wounded. Disease would incapacitate thousands more, but the Marines would hold Henderson Field, and in holding it, they would shift the strategic balance in the Pacific. The strategic importance of Guadalcanal derived from geography. The island sat at the southern end of the Solomons chain, approximately 200 miles northeast of Australia. Japanese possession of an operational airfield there would threaten Allied supply lines to Australia and New Zealand. American possession would provide a forward base for offensive operations toward the Japanese stronghold at Rabaul, 565 miles to the northwest. Control of Guadalcanal meant control of the Southern Solomons. Control of the Southern Solomons meant the ability to project air power across a critical theater of operations. General Vandergrift understood this. He also understood his vulnerability. The Navy could not guarantee sustained naval support. Japanese airfields at Rabaul put enemy bombers within range of Guadalcanal. Japanese naval forces based at Rabaul and Truk could reach the Solomons faster than American reinforcements from the nearest major base at Espiritu Santo, 660 miles southeast. The Marines had to make Henderson Field operational before Japanese forces could mount a major counterattack. They had to hold it regardless of what happened offshore. Marine engineers and Seabees from the Navy's 6th Naval Construction Battalion worked continuously to complete the airfield. They used abandoned Japanese equipment when possible. A captured steamroller proved particularly valuable. On August 12th, 5 days after the landing, a PBY Catalina landed at Henderson Field. On August 20th, the first fighters arrived. 19 F-4F Wildcats from Marine Fighter Squadron 223 and 12 SBD Dauntless dive bombers from Marine Scout Bombing Squadron 232. The aircraft had flown from the escort carrier USS Long Island, operating 200 miles southeast of Guadalcanal. Henderson Field was operational. The Japanese response came in waves, each more powerful than the last. Imperial General Headquarters in Tokyo initially underestimated American strength on Guadalcanal, believing only 2,000 Marines had landed. They dispatched the Ichiki Detachment, approximately 900 men under Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki, to retake the airfield. Ichiki was a veteran of combat in China and experienced in night assault tactics. He landed on Guadalcanal on August 18th with the first echelon of his force. He did not wait for the second echelon. He attacked immediately. The Battle of the Tenaru River occurred on the night of August 21st. Ichiki's force, numbering approximately 800 men in the assault, attacked marine positions east of the Ilu River, later misidentified as the Tenaru River in American reports. The Japanese plan called for a frontal assault supported by enveloping movements. They advanced in columns, bayonets fixed, officers leading with samurai swords drawn. They hit positions held by the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines. The Marines had deployed wire obstacles, machine gun positions with interlocking fields of fire, and pre-registered artillery. When the Japanese attack began at 1:30 a.m., Marine gunners opened fire at point-blank range. The Japanese pressed the attack with extreme aggression, attempting to break through by sheer determination. They failed. At dawn, Marine tanks from Company A, 1st Tank Battalion, counterattacked. The Stuart light tanks crossed the sandbar at the river mouth and swept along the beach, crushing Japanese positions. Artillery from the 11th Marines fired in support. By afternoon, the battle was over. Colonel Ichiki burned his regimental colors and committed suicide. Of approximately 800 Japanese soldiers who participated in the assault, 777 were killed. 15 were captured. Marine casualties totaled 44 killed and 71 wounded. The destruction of the Ichiki detachment shocked Japanese commanders. They had underestimated both American firepower and defensive capabilities. Imperial General Headquarters committed larger forces. Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake, commanding the 17th Army, ordered the entire 35th Infantry Brigade to Guadalcanal. Approximately 6,000 men under Major General Kiyotake Kawaguchi would assault Henderson Field from multiple directions. The operation was scheduled for September. Marine intelligence detected the Japanese buildup through Coastwatcher reports and aerial reconnaissance. Vandergrift had received reinforcements. The 1st Raider Battalion and 1st Parachute Battalion had arrived in late August, bringing total Marine strength to approximately 12,000 men. But supplies remained critically short. The Navy had withdrawn most transport shipping after the disastrous Battle of Savo Island on August 9th, where Japanese cruisers had sunk 4 Allied heavy cruisers and severely damaged another. Subsequent naval battles, Eastern Solomons on August 24th, prevented sustained resupply operations. The Marines began rationing food. By early September, Marines were receiving 2 meals per day, sometimes 1. The daily ration was reduced to approximately 2,000 calories, well below the minimum required for sustained combat operations in tropical conditions. Official ration scales called for 4,000 to 4,500 calories daily for men engaged in heavy labor and combat. The deficit was unsustainable. Marines began losing weight rapidly. Energy levels dropped. Combat effectiveness declined. Medical officers reported increasing cases of malnutrition-related conditions. The captured Japanese rice became critical. Guadalcanal's jungle offered little in terms of edible food. Coconuts provided some nutrition. Captured Japanese supplies included soy sauce, canned fish, and seaweed, none of which appealed to American tastes, but all of which provided calories. Some Marines supplemented their diet by hunting. Wild pigs existed on the island but proved difficult to catch. Birds offered minimal return for effort expended. Accounts of Marines eating rats appear in multiple after-action reports and personal memoirs. Though the extent of this practice remains unclear, Lieutenant Colonel Merrill Twining, Vandergrift's operations officer, later stated that some Marines did consume rats out of desperation, particularly during October and November, when rations reached their lowest levels. Disease compounded the food shortage. Guadalcanal's climate, hot, humid with frequent rain, created ideal conditions for mosquito-borne illnesses. Malaria struck first. By September, hundreds of Marines were incapacitated by malarial fever. The division medical staff had limited supplies of quinine and atabrine, the primary anti-malarial drugs. Medical protocols called for daily prophylactic doses of atabrine, but supplies couldn't meet demand. Marines who contracted malaria suffered recurring fevers, chills, and debilitating weakness. Many remained on duty despite being sick. There was no alternative. Every man was needed. Dysentery spread through units rapidly. Poor sanitation, contaminated water sources, and the tropical environment created conditions for bacterial and amoebic dysentery. Affected Marines suffered severe diarrhea, dehydration, and abdominal pain. In combat conditions with limited medical supplies and no possibility of evacuation for any but the most severe cases, dysentery became a chronic condition. Men fought while sick. They dug defensive positions while weakened by fever and intestinal disease. Fungal infections affected nearly everyone. The constant moisture rotted clothing and ate into skin. Jungle rot became the unofficial diagnosis for various tropical skin conditions that caused painful lesions, particularly on the feet and hands. On September 12th, General Kawaguchi launched his assault. The Japanese plan called for coordinated attacks from 3 directions. From the south against what became known as Edson's Ridge, from the east along the coast, and from the west. Approximately 6,000 Japanese troops participated. They faced roughly 11,000 Marines, but only a portion of the Marine force was positioned at the critical southern approach to Henderson Field. Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Edson commanded the composite force defending the ridge south of Henderson Field. His 1st Raider Battalion and the 1st Parachute Battalion, approximately 840 men total. The ridge was a coral spine running north-south, rising about 100 feet above the surrounding jungle. It dominated the southern approaches to the airfield. Japanese forces advancing from the south would have to cross it or go around it through even more difficult terrain. Edson recognized its importance and fortified it accordingly. The Battle of Edson's Ridge began on the night of September 12th with probing attacks. The main assault came on September 13th. Kawaguchi committed his forces in human wave attacks, attempting to overwhelm the Marine positions through numerical superiority and aggressive close combat. The Japanese advanced through intense machine gun and rifle fire, artillery bombardment from the 11th Marines, and naval gunfire from destroyers offshore. They reached Marine positions multiple times. Hand-to-hand combat occurred in several locations. Japanese soldiers penetrated to within 1,000 yards of Henderson Field's perimeter. The Marines held. Edson moved between positions under fire, reorganizing units and directing artillery. Marine gunners fired at point-blank range. Artillery forward observers called fire missions on Japanese forces less than 100 yards from their positions. The 105mm howitzers of the 11th Marines fired over 2,000 rounds during the 2-night battle. When the attacks ceased on the morning of September 14th, Japanese casualties exceeded 800 killed. Marine casualties totaled 104 killed and 278 wounded. Henderson Field remained secure. The Japanese had been repulsed again, but they continued reinforcing. Throughout September and October, the Tokyo Express, high-speed destroyer runs down the slot between the Solomon Islands, delivered additional troops and supplies. By mid-October, Japanese strength on Guadalcanal exceeded 20,000 men. The 2nd Division, under Lieutenant General Masao Maruyama, had arrived, along with heavy artillery. General Hyakutake personally came to the island to direct operations. The Japanese planned a massive coordinated offensive for late October, coinciding with a major naval operation to destroy American naval forces and isolate the Marines. Vandergrift's situation had deteriorated significantly. His Marines numbered approximately 23,000 by late October, but thousands were sick. Medical reports from October indicate that over 2,000 Marines were hospitalized with malaria, dysentery, or other tropical diseases. Many more remained on duty while ill. The division was consuming itself. Supply deliveries remained irregular and insufficient. Weight loss among the Marines averaged 20 to 30 pounds per man. Some individuals lost more than 50 pounds. Physical deterioration was visible and alarming. The October offensive began on the night of October 23rd, with diversionary attacks along the Matanikau River to the west. The main assault came on October 24th and 25th against the southern perimeter. Maruyama's 2nd Division, numbering approximately 7,000 men in the assault force, attacked positions held by the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, and elements of the 164th Infantry Regiment, an army unit that had recently reinforced the division. The numerical advantage favored the Japanese significantly in this sector. Estimates suggest a ratio of approximately 3 to 1 or higher at the point of attack. The Japanese attacked in successive waves throughout the night. Marine defensive positions centered on a ridge system later designated Hill 67. The terrain channeled Japanese attacks into relatively narrow frontages where Marine machine guns and artillery could concentrate fire. The 11th Marines fired continuously, sometimes at ranges under 1,500 yards. Ammunition expenditure was extreme. The regiment fired more than 6,000 rounds during the battle. Naval gunfire from cruisers and destroyers offshore added to the defensive fires. The fighting was brutal and sustained. Japanese forces penetrated Marine positions multiple times. Close-quarters combat with rifles, bayonets, grenades, and entrenching tools occurred throughout the night. Marine wounded were evacuated under fire. Japanese forces regrouped and attacked again. The attacks continued through October 25th and into the early morning of October 26th. When daylight came, Japanese forces withdrew into the jungle, leaving over 2,000 dead. Marine and Army casualties totaled approximately 200 killed and 400 wounded. The October offensive represented Japan's maximum effort to retake Guadalcanal. Its failure had strategic consequences. The combined fleet had sortied to support the ground offensive, resulting in the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands on October 26th. While tactically a Japanese victory, the carrier USS Hornet was sunk. The battle cost Japan irreplaceable carrier pilots. Simultaneously, Japanese supply difficulties worsened. American air attacks from Henderson Field interdicted Japanese resupply efforts increasingly effectively. The strategic balance was shifting. For the Marines on Guadalcanal, October represented the nadir. Medical records indicate that by the end of the month, malaria rates approached 100% in some units. Nearly every Marine had contracted the disease at some point. Many suffered recurring episodes. Dysentery was equally prevalent. Weight loss continued. Combat effectiveness declined measurably. The division was approaching the limits of human endurance. November brought some improvement as supply deliveries increased, but the fundamental situation remained precarious. The statistics were grim but telling. Between August 7th and December 9th, 1942, the 1st Marine Division suffered 650 killed in action and 1,278 wounded in action on Guadalcanal itself. An additional 8,500 Marines were evacuated due to disease, primarily malaria, dysentery, and other tropical illnesses. The disease evacuation rate exceeded combat casualties by a ratio of more than 4 to 1. This pattern was unprecedented in Marine Corps history and reflected the environmental conditions on Guadalcanal. Japanese losses were catastrophically higher. Estimates of total Japanese casualties on Guadalcanal vary, but most historians conclude that approximately 25,000 Japanese soldiers died on the island between August 1942 and February 1943. Of these, combat deaths accounted for roughly 9,000. The remainder died from disease, starvation, and the cumulative effects of the failed supply situation. Japanese logistics never solved the fundamental problem of delivering sustained food and medical supplies to their forces. American control of Henderson Field meant daylight naval operations became suicidal. Night destroyer runs could deliver troops, but not the tonnage of supplies required to sustain a large force. The 1st Marine Division was relieved in December 1942. The 2nd Marine Division and the Army's American Division took over operations. The 1st Marine Division departed Guadalcanal between December 9th and 23rd, moving to Australia for rest, recovery, and reconstitution. The division was physically wrecked. Medical examinations revealed that approximately 75% of the division required extended medical treatment for malaria, malnutrition, or other tropical diseases. Many Marines required months to regain their pre-deployment weight and physical condition. General Vandergrift received the Medal of Honor for his leadership during the campaign. 11 other Marines from the 1st Division received the Medal of Honor for actions on Guadalcanal, including Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone for his defense of Henderson Field during the October offensive, and Sergeant Mitchell Page for single-handedly holding a position against repeated Japanese attacks on the night of October 25-26th. The claim that the Marines were outnumbered 5.1 requires clarification. Overall force ratios varied throughout the campaign. Initially, the Marines significantly outnumbered Japanese forces. By October, Japanese troop strength exceeded Marine numbers on the island as a whole. However, during specific engagements, particularly the October offensive, local force ratios at points of attack did favor the Japanese significantly, with ratios ranging from 2.1 to perhaps 4.1 or 5.1 in specific sectors. The overall campaign cannot be characterized as a 6-month defense against consistently overwhelming numerical odds, but specific battles involved defending against numerically superior attacking forces. The strategic impact of Guadalcanal was decisive. It marked the first sustained Allied offensive in the Pacific. It proved that Japanese forces could be defeated in prolonged ground combat. It demonstrated that American industrial capacity could support sustained operations across vast distances. It cost Japan irreplaceable ships, aircraft, and, most critically, trained pilots and sailors. The 6-month attrition battle consumed Japanese resources that could not be replaced. American resources, while strained, were expanding rapidly. Henderson Field remained operational throughout the campaign, despite repeated bombardments, air attacks, and ground assaults. From that airfield, Marine, Navy, and Army Air Forces aircraft struck Japanese shipping, bombed Japanese positions, and supported ground operations. The airfield was the center of gravity for the entire campaign. The 1st Marine Division's mission was to take it and hold it. They accomplished that mission at extraordinary cost. The physical conditions endured by the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal became legendary within the Marine Corps. The combination of sustained combat, inadequate food, endemic disease, and environmental extremes tested human limits. That the division maintained combat effectiveness under such conditions speaks to training, leadership, and unit cohesion. The Marines held because surrender was not an option and evacuation was impossible. They held because Henderson Field was worth holding. They held because the strategic situation in the Pacific in late 1942 offered no alternative. The defense of Guadalcanal established patterns that would characterize the Pacific War. American material superiority gradually overwhelming Japanese tactical skill and fighting spirit. The crucial importance of logistics and supply lines. The devastating effectiveness of combined arms operations when properly coordinated. And the terrible human cost of island warfare in tropical conditions. For the 1st Marine Division, Guadalcanal was the defining battle of World War II. The division would fight again, at Cape Gloucester, Peleliu, and Okinawa. But Guadalcanal remained the campaign that forged its identity and tested its limits. The 6 months on Guadalcanal demonstrated what the Marine Corps could endure and accomplish. It also revealed the costs of sustained tropical combat. The lessons learned influenced subsequent Pacific operations. particularly regarding disease prevention, supply requirements, and the necessity of rotating units before complete physical breakdown occurred. The 1st Marine Division's experience provided brutal proof that even elite units have operational limits dictated by human physiology and environmental conditions. On December 9, 1942, when the first elements of the 1st Marine Division boarded transports at Guadalcanal, they left behind a functioning airbase, a defeated enemy, and a strategic situation fundamentally altered. They also left 650 of their fellow Marines buried in island cemeteries. The survivors carried malaria parasites in their blood, intestinal diseases, and memories of hunger, fear, and combat at its most primitive level. They had held Guadalcanal for 6 months. The cost was measurable in casualties, disease rates, and weight loss. The value was measured in strategic advantage and the trajectory of the Pacific War. The mathematics favored the Marines. Barely.